I saw them switch the folder. 7 words whispered by a 6-year-old, words that could collapse an entire kingdom. I saw them switch the folder. 7 words whispered by a 6-year-old girl. 7 words that should never have been spoken in the Alpha Citadel. 7 words that held the power to fracture clans, dethrone an Alpha, and turn peace into bloodshed. And they came from a child who was never meant to be seen. Vanaya had spent her life learning how to fold herself into silence. Servant children in Silvercrest survived by becoming shadows. And Vanaya, with her small hands and lowered gaze, had mastered the art better than anyone. Invisible, quiet, forgettable, until the night she wasn't. Because there, under the stormlit torches and drifting parchment dust, a little girl witnessed what seasoned warriors, trained spies, and the Alpha Zone Council had failed to see. 2 cloaked officials switching the sacred Moonmate contract. The document that determined who the billionaire Alpha Kaelor would be bound to. And the treaty that kept 7 clans from tearing each other apart. A forged scroll. A stolen destiny. A kingdom pushed to the edge of war. And only one child saw it happen. The smallest voice in the Citadel, the one raised to stay quiet, became the single voice that could save an Alpha's throne. But the moment Vanaya breathed those trembling words, everything she'd been taught about silence shattered. And her life collided with the most feared man in Silvercrest. This is where the story truly begins. With a child who wasn't supposed to witness anything. And the night she saw too much. Now let's go back to where Vanaya's journey begins. To the stormy halls, the hidden Moonmark on her wrist, and the path that would lead her straight into the Alpha's destiny. The silence that fell over the Citadel was not the peaceful kind. Within an hour of Vanaya's revelation, Kaelor had enacted what the Royal Guard called a shadow lockdown, no announcements, no alarm bells, but every gate sealed, every patrol doubled, and every warrior given a single command, *watch. Report. Trust no one, *. He stood now in his private study, the weight of leadership pressing against his shoulders like physical armor. Through the arched window, the moon cast silver light across the training grounds where tomorrow his warriors would spar and laugh, unaware that betrayal walked among them. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Vanaya slipped through the doorway, her small hand clutching her mother's skirt. Lyra's face was pale, her eyes darting between the Alpha and the floor as though she couldn't decide which was more terrifying to look at. You wish to see us, Alpha? Lyra's voice trembled. Kaelor's expression softened, a skill few ever witnessed. He gestured to the cushioned chairs near the hearth. Please, sit. Vanaya climbed into the chair with practiced ease, folding her hands in her lap like a small diplomat. Her silver eyes, those haunting, knowing eyes, studied him with an intensity that made him feel strangely exposed. Vanaya, he began, keeping his tone gentle, I need you to tell me everything you remember. How long have you been seeing these men? 3 moons, she answered without hesitation. Maybe 4. They meet when the night patrol changes. There's a gap. 17 minutes when the south corridor is empty. Kaelor's jaw tightened. She had counted. This child had not only observed treachery, but had analyzed patrol patterns with the precision of a trained scout. And what did they say? Can you remember their words? Vanaya tilted her head, and for a moment, she looked far older than her years. They said your mate bond would nullify the contract, that the council would never accept a fated bond over a political one. They said, she paused, her brow furrowing. They said you were becoming too powerful, that you needed to be managed. The word hung in the air like a blade. Managed, *, as if he were livestock. As if the Alpha who had united 3 territories and brought peace to a fractured realm was merely a tool to be controlled. Did they see you? Kaelor asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. No. I'm very quiet. Vanaya swung her feet, which didn't quite reach the floor. Then, with the abruptness of a child who had been thinking deeply, she asked, Alpha Kaelor, are you lonely even with all your warriors? The question struck him like an arrow finding its mark. Lyra gasped softly. Vanaya, that's not. It's all right. Kaelor raised a hand, his eyes never leaving the child's face. Something cracked in his chest, a hairline fracture in armor he'd worn for so long he'd forgotten it was there. Yes, he admitted quietly. Sometimes I am. Vanaya nodded as if he'd simply confirmed something she already knew. That's why they think they can trick you. They think lonely people make mistakes. Vanaya. Lyra's face flushed crimson. You cannot speak to the Alpha this way. But Kaelor was smiling a real smile, sad and small. She speaks only truth, Lyra. A rare gift in royal halls. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Thank you, little moon. You may have saved more than you know. When he finally turned his attention to Lyra, his expression shifted to something more formal, more alpha. I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand I ask not as your ruler, but as someone trying to protect your daughter. Lyra's hands twisted in her lap. She knew what was coming. Who is her father? The serving woman's face went white. Her mouth opened, closed. Her eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. And then, with the quiet defiance of someone who had protected a secret through years of fear and shame, she whispered, I cannot say. Cannot or will not. Both. Kaelor studied her for a long moment, reading the truth in her silence. Whoever Vanaya's father was, revealing him would bring danger, not just to Lyra, but to the child herself. Perhaps the Moonmark was only part of what made Vanaya so extraordinary. Then I will not press you, he said finally. But know this. Whatever secrets you carry, they are safe within these walls. I protect my own. Lyra's tears finally fell. Far below, in a forgotten storage room beneath the kitchens, 3 figures convened in darkness. The child saw us. The first voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Impossible. We used cloaking runes. I'm telling you, someone witnessed the exchange. The Alpha has sealed the Citadel. A long silence. Then a third voice, cold and calculating. Find out who. Servants hear everything. Question them. Carefully. And if it's the child? Don't be ridiculous. She's 4 years old. She has the Moonmark. Another silence, heavier than before. Then we have a problem. By nightfall, Vanaya had a shadow. He was called Ren, a warrior of the royal guard whose loyalty Kaelor trusted absolutely. He'd fought beside the Alpha through the Borderland Wars and had once carried Kaelor's wounded body 3 miles through enemy territory. If Kaelor trusted anyone with something precious, it was Ren. She goes nowhere alone, Kaelor had commanded. Not to the kitchens, not to the gardens, not even to the privy if you can help it. Someone wants the witness silenced. Ensure they fail. Now Ren stood outside Lyra's small quarters, his hand resting on his sword hilt, his eyes scanning the corridor with professional precision. Inside, Vanaya couldn't sleep. The Moonmark on her brow pulsed softly, warm against her skin. She pressed her small hand to it, confused by the sensation, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers, like a warning written in a language she'd never learned but somehow understood. Mama, she whispered. Yes, little moon. Something bad is coming. Lyra pulled her daughter close, her own heart hammering. Ren will protect us. The Alpha will protect us. But Vanaya shook her head against her mother's chest. Not tonight. Soon. When they know for certain. In the storage room, the coldest voice spoke again. A child knows too much. Remove her before the Alpha learns the rest. The royal mage's chamber smelled of ancient parchment and moonflower oil. Scents meant to calm, though nothing could settle the tension crackling through the air like static before a storm. Kaelor stood with his arms crossed, watching as 3 of his most trusted mages bent over the scrolls spread across the obsidian examination table. Enchanted crystals hovered above the documents, casting colored light that shifted and pulsed as they detected different layers of magic. Master Siren, eldest of the 3, traced his gnarled finger along the edge of the contested contract without touching it. His white eyebrows drew together in a scowl that deepened with each passing moment. Well, Kaelor's voice was controlled, but those who knew him could hear the blade's edge beneath the calm. Alpha. Siren straightened slowly, his ancient bones protesting. This is old magic. Very old. And very, very illegal. The room seemed to contract around those words. Show me. Siren gestured, and the crystals rearranged themselves, focusing their light on specific sections of the scroll. Under the concentrated illumination, hidden runes began to glow faint at first, then blazing with sickly green luminescence that made Kaelor's wolf snarl inside his chest. Here. Siren pointed to symbols woven so cunningly into the decorative border that they appeared to be nothing more than artistic flourishes. A compulsion seal. Not just a political arrangement, Alpha, but a forced mate bond. Once activated, it would override your wolf's natural instincts, chemically binding you to Lady Seraphine regardless of whether she is your true mate. Kaelor's hands clenched into fists. That's an abomination, finished Mage Tessa, the youngest of the three. Her dark skin had gone ashen. Outlawed by the Council of Alphas 2 centuries ago after the Blood Moon Tyrant used similar magic to bind unwilling mates and breed an army of thralls. There's more. Siren's voice was grim. He shifted the crystals to illuminate another section, this one hidden within the signature block itself. A blood seal. Not just Lady Seraphine's blood, but... Alpha, this is complicated. It's anchored to someone else. Someone with significant magical power. Meaning whoever truly crafted this contract has tied it to themselves. If you were to find your true mate, this seal would activate and... He hesitated. Say it. It would destroy your true mate's claim. The magic would recognize Seraphine as your bonded partner and would interpret any other mate bond as a threat. Your true mate would be... He struggled for the right word. Nullified. Severed from you at the soul level. It would likely kill them. The silence that followed was absolute. Kaelor's wolf surged forward, and for a moment his eyes flashed gold with barely restrained fury. When he spoke, his voice resonated with alpha command, the tone that bent lesser wolves to their knees. Who crafted this? That's what troubles me most. Siren carefully rolled the forged scroll, handling it like the poison it was. This level of magic requires not just skill, but intimate knowledge of royal bloodline magic. It would take months to craft, years to plan. And Alpha. He met Kaelor's gaze directly. It would require access to your personal chambers, to objects you've touched, perhaps even to your blood. The implications settled like lead in Kaelor's stomach. My counsel, he said quietly. The infiltration goes deeper than I thought. Not just your counsel. Tessa moved to a different table where runic detection equipment lay scattered. We checked the surveillance runes you had placed throughout the Citadel. Standard security magic that records magical signatures in sensitive areas. She lifted a crystal that should have glowed with stored information. It was dark, dead. Someone erased them. All of them. Every recording from the past 6 months. Only someone with master-level clearance could do that, Siren added. Someone you trusted with the Citadel's deepest defenses. Kaelor's mind raced through the names, the faces. His inner circle was small by design. Only those who had proven themselves through years of loyalty. And yet someone among them had betrayed not just him, but the very foundation of their kind. The mate bond was sacred. To corrupt it, to weaponize it. This isn't about politics, he realized aloud. This is about destroying the Alpha bloodline itself. If I can't bond with my true mate, if I'm forced into a false bond, your heirs would be weakened, Siren confirmed. Perhaps powerless. The Alpha line would end with you, for all practical purposes. In 3 generations, your territory would fall to whoever planned this. Someone wants the throne destabilized, Kaelor said slowly. But more than that, they want to ensure I have no true heirs. No legacy. They're not trying to kill me. They're trying to erase my line from history. Tessa and Siren exchanged troubled glances. Such conspiracy required patience, resources, and a hatred so deep it spanned generations. What are your orders, Alpha? Siren asked. Kaelor stared at the forged scroll, his expression carved from stone. Seal this chamber. No one enters without my personal authorization. Begin tracing the blood seal. I want to know whose signature it carries. And Siren. His eyes glowed gold again. Find out who had access to the surveillance runes. I want names by morning. Yes, Alpha. As Kaelor turned to leave, Tessa called out softly, Alpha? The child who witnessed the exchange. Keep her close. The Moonmark is more than decoration. It's a kind of magical sensitivity we don't fully understand. If she saw through cloaking runes meant to hide the traitors, she may be able to sense things even our best detection spells miss. Kaelor paused in the doorway. She's 4 years old. Yes, Tessa agreed. But she's also something we haven't seen in 3 centuries. Don't waste that gift. Vanaya woke with a gasp, her Moonmark burning against her forehead like a brand. Mama. She sat bolt upright in the small bed, her heart hammering. Lyra was beside her in an instant, gathering her daughter close. What is it, little moon? A nightmare? No. Vanaya pressed her hand to her brow where the crescent glowed with soft silver light. They're coming. The bad men. There, she turned toward the door with such sudden intensity that Lyra followed her gaze. Outside, they heard Ren's sharp command, state your business. Message for the servant Lyra. From the Alpha. At this hour? Give it to me. I'll deliver it. My orders are to deliver it personally. Vanaya's Moonmark flared brighter, pulsing with warning. Mama, don't let them in. Don't let them. The door exploded inward. Ren's shout of alarm was cut short by the sound of steel meeting steel. Lyra threw herself over Vanaya, shielding her daughter with her own body as 2 figures in dark cloaks stormed into the small room. The child, one hissed. Take the child. But Vanaya's scream was not one of fear, it was something else, something primal and powerful that resonated with magic even she didn't understand. The Moonmark blazed like a star, and light exploded outward in a concussive wave that sent both attackers staggering backward. In the corridor, Ren recovered his footing and drove his blade through the first attacker's guard. The alarm bell was already ringing. Vanaya's magical burst had triggered every protective ward in the vicinity. Heavy footsteps thundered through the halls. Guards poured into the corridor, surrounding the remaining attacker who stood frozen, calculating odds he could no longer beat. And then Kaelor was there, moving through his warriors like death itself, his eyes blazing gold and his alpha presence so overwhelming that every wolf in the vicinity, including the attacker, instinctively bared their throats in submission. Secure him, Kaelor commanded, his voice resonating with power. Then, gentler, Lyra. Vanaya, are you hurt? Lyra was trembling but intact. Vanaya stared up at the Alpha with those 2 knowing silver eyes, her Moonmark still glowing softly. I told you something bad was coming, she said simply. Kaelor knelt before the child, heedless of his warriors watching this unprecedented display. Yes, you did. And you were right. He studied her face, seeing past the child to the mystery she represented. I need to ask you something, Vanaya. Would you be willing to help me? Truly help me. How? By telling me when that mark on your forehead warns you. By sitting with me when I meet with my advisors. By being my eyes for the dangers I cannot see. Lyra's sharp intake of breath was audible. Alpha, she's only the one who saw through their cloaking magic, Kaelor interrupted gently. The one whose instincts just saved her own life and possibly prevented more violence. Age doesn't diminish gift, Lyra. And I won't waste what the gods have given us. He returned his attention to Vanaya. What do you say, little moon? Will you help me find the traitors? Vanaya looked at her mother, then back at the Alpha. When she nodded, it was with the solemnity of someone taking an oath. I'll help. In the dungeons below, the captured attacker sat in chains, his face hidden by shadow. She has to die, he whispered to himself and perhaps to whoever had sent him. Before she sees too much. Before she understands what she is. Outside his cell, the guard shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to hear. But in the deepest shadows of the Citadel, other ears were listening. And other plans were already being made. A child knows too much. And now the Alpha protects her. We'll need a different approach. Then find one. We've come too far to fail because of a girl child with a glowing forehead. Oh, I will. But first, we silence everyone else who might corroborate her story. The servant. The guard. Anyone who might connect the pieces. Asterisk. A pause, heavy with malice. Kill them all. Frame it as an accident. and leave the child for last, when she's alone, grieving, unprotected. That's when we'll take her, asterisk. And if the Alpha interferes, asterisk. A cold laugh echoed through the darkness. Then perhaps it's time to remove him too. The attack came during the changing of the guard, precisely 17 minutes into the patrol gap that Vanaya had identified 3 days prior. She was walking the corridor between the servants' quarters and the kitchens, her small hand clasped in Ren's calloused palm. Her mother had sent her to fetch honey for a tea to calm her nerves. Lyra had barely slept since the last attack, jumping at shadows and keeping Vanaya within arm's reach every waking moment. Ren had protested the errand, but Vanaya's Moonmark had been calm, quiet against her brow. No warning. No danger sensed. That should have been the first warning itself. Holding Nara close, she glanced back one last time. Kael still stood there in the lamplight, broad, imposing, unreadable, but with a softness she hadn't noticed until now. An Alpha feared by kings. A man who looked at her child as though he'd been waiting for her his entire life. And Beyoncé felt it again. That subtle pull. That invisible thread. That first whisper of a bond awakening. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew one thing. Her life, and Nara's, was no longer her own. Morning light spilled through the stone arches of Blackmoor Keep like a gentle blessing, golden, warm, and startlingly alive for a fortress built by warriors. Beyoncé held Nara close as she stepped into the corridor, blinking at the brightness. She half expected the keep to feel cold, harsh, or suffocating. Instead, it breathed. Servants moved quietly through the halls, bowing respectfully when they passed her. The air carried the scent of fresh bread, burning cedar, and something faintly metallic, magic, though she didn't know how she knew that. A woman approached, dressed in a simple blue gown and wearing a braided cord at her waist. "Lady Beyoncé," she said with a warm bow. "I am Mara. The Alpha instructed me to show you the keep today." "Lady?" Beyoncé nearly choked. "Oh no, I'm not." "The Alpha's orders," Mara replied with a soft smile. "We don't question them." Beyoncé fell silent. She didn't dare question them either. Mara guided her down a long hallway lit by floating orbs of amber light. Beyoncé stared, wide-eyed. "They're spell lamps," Mara explained. "Enchanted by the keep's founders. They brighten or dim according to who walks beneath them." Beyoncé noticed they glowed a little brighter when she passed, but when Nara stirred, they flared. Mara's steps faltered for a heartbeat. "You see? The keep recognizes her." Beyoncé hugged Nara protectively, unsure whether to feel comforted or alarmed. They reached a balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. Soldiers trained below, but not with ordinary weapons. Some wielded silver-edged staffs that sparked with bursts of blue light. Others practiced shield formations glowing with runic sigils. "This place," Beyoncé whispered. "What is it really?" Mara folded her hands. "Blackmoor Keep is more than a home for the Alpha. It is a sanctuary. The last stronghold for wolfline magic." Beyoncé's breath caught. "So Kael, he's protecting children like Nara?" Mara nodded, her expression shadowing. "Many have gone missing. Villages wake to empty cradles. Some never find a trace. Some find ashes." Beyoncé's stomach turned. "Nara was never supposed to reach these walls," Mara continued quietly. "If she hadn't been brought here, if the Alpha hadn't intervened." She let the sentence fade. Beyoncé didn't want to hear the end. They continued the tour, through libraries filled with ancient scrolls, through chambers lined with enchanted relics that hummed when Nara was carried past them. Beyoncé couldn't stop noticing how the walls themselves seemed to shift subtly, as if watching them. By midday, Mara led them to a quieter wing of the keep. "This is where the Alpha spends most of his time," she said, stopping before a large oak door carved with a wolf's crest. Before Beyoncé could ask anything, the door opened. Kael stood inside, his broad frame illuminated by the glow of suspended runes drifting above an open table. His eyes lifted immediately, not to Beyoncé, but to Nara. The runes flickered when he looked at her. Almost bowing, Mara quietly excused herself. Beyoncé stepped inside slowly. The room smelled of old parchment and protective magic, the kind that made the hairs rise on her arms. Kael's attention returned to her. "You slept well." Not a greeting. Not a command. A genuine question. She nodded. "Yes. Thank you." Kael motioned her closer. "There is something I want you to see." He swept his hand over the table. The runes brightened, revealing a map of the kingdom, mountains, forests, rivers, all marked with glowing points. "These are the places where wolfline children were taken," Kael said. His voice remained calm, but Beyoncé felt the anger simmering beneath it. She pointed to the brightest mark. "What about that one?" Kael's jaw tightened. "That is where Nara was born." The room went still. Her legs weakened. She clutched Nara instinctively. "You knew where we lived?" "I knew a child was taken from that region," he said. "I didn't know she survived or was hidden in plain sight." The guilt in his eyes surprised her, as though he believed he should have found Nara sooner. Before she could speak, a sudden chill swept through the room. A shadow slid across the wall, wrong, too tall, too thin. Beyoncé gasped and stepped back, shielding Nara with her body. Kael moved instantly. He crossed the room in one step, placing himself between them. The air around him thickened, trembling with power. His eyes darkened, wolf-dark. "Show yourself," he growled. The shadow recoiled as if burned. Then it darted upward and vanished through a crack of darkness near the ceiling. Kael cursed under his breath. "Spies," he muttered. "Searching for her already." Beyoncé swallowed hard. "Was it human?" "No," Kael said. "And not alive." She clutched Nara even tighter. "Why are they after her?" Kael turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "Because a child with dormant wolfline magic can reshape the future of our people." His voice softened. "And because she is more powerful than you realize." Almost on cue, Nara stirred, and the runes above the table pulsed gently in response. Beyoncé froze. Kael watched with an expression she couldn't decipher, some mix of reverence and inevitability. "She reacts to you," Beyoncé whispered. "She reacts to the bond," Kael corrected softly. "Between wolfline magic and its chosen alpha." Beyoncé's pulse stumbled. "Chosen? By who?" "By fate," Kael said. "By whatever ancient force guides these lineages. I do not pretend to understand it completely. But I know this." He stepped closer, his presence warm and grounding rather than intimidating. "When she looks at me, her spark settles. She feels safety instinctively. Wolfline children sense their protectors before they can even speak." Beyoncé glanced down at Nara, who was now staring directly at Kael, tiny fingers outstretched toward him. Something in Beyoncé softened. Unwilling. Unexpected. Kael reached out slowly. "May I?" She hesitated only a breath before nodding. He touched Nara's hand. A faint pulse of violet light glimmered briefly where their skin met. Nara giggled. Beyoncé's heart clenched. Something ancient was moving between them, between all three of them. And though she didn't understand it, she could feel it rising like a tide. Kael stepped back reluctantly, clearing his throat. "You are safe here," he said again, but this time it wasn't a command or even reassurance. It was a vow. Beyoncé felt the truth of it in her bones. When Mara returned to escort her back to her chambers, Beyoncé glanced over her shoulder. Kael still stood watching her. Not as a king examining a peasant, but as a protector bound to something he could no longer ignore. And Beyoncé felt it again. That quiet pull, that whisper of a bond forming in the spaces between them. Danger surrounded them. Magic stirred beneath the keep stones. Enemies watched through cracks in reality itself. But for the first time since Nara's birth, Beyoncé did not feel alone. If you'd like, I can begin Chapter 5, the Moonlit Trial next, with building tension, magic awakening, and the first true threat against Nara. Night settled heavily over Blackmoor Keep, thick with fog and the low hum of magic. Beyoncé lay awake in the guest chamber, staring at the ceiling beams. Nara slept curled against her chest, warm and soft, but restless. Every few breaths, the baby twitched as if responding to something Beyoncé couldn't see. A whisper of wind brushed the window. Then Nara's wrist glowed. Softly at first, like moonlight warming beneath her skin. Beyoncé froze, breath trapped in her throat. The glow brightened, pulsing with a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, but not quite. Something older. Wilder. "Nara," she whispered. The baby opened her eyes. They shimmered faintly violet. And Beyoncé heard it. Not a cry. Not a sound. A thought. "Mama." Barely a whisper inside her mind, fragile as dew and just as fleeting. But Beyoncé lurched upright, heart hammering. Oh gods, oh gods. The glow faded as quickly as it came. Nara blinked sleepily and nestled back into her mother's arms, unaware she had just crossed into something extraordinary. Moments later, a knock echoed at the door, firm but controlled. Beyoncé hesitated before opening it. Kael stood outside, cloak thrown over simple tunic and trousers, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd come from some midnight patrol. But it was the expression on his face, alert, sensing something, that struck her. "You felt it too," he said quietly. Beyoncé swallowed. Her wrist, it glowed. "And I think I heard." "Thoughts?" Kael finished. "Faint impressions. Wolfline children experience early telepathic sparks when their magic stirs." She held Nara tighter. "Is she in danger?" Kael stepped into the room without waiting for permission, but his presence did not feel intrusive. Instead, it felt anchoring. "The fact she awakened tonight means others may have sensed it," he said. "Hunters. Rival alphas. Anyone attuned to wolfline power." Fear clawed Beyoncé's chest, but she forced herself to stay still. "Then what do we do?" Kael's gaze lifted to her, something fierce and protective simmering behind it. "We protect her. Together." The word together should not have comforted her as much as it did. Kael moved closer, examining Nara gently. The baby blinked up at him, and her wrist gave the faintest pulse of light again. Kael inhaled sharply, almost reverently. "She recognizes you," Beyoncé whispered. "She recognizes the bond," Kael corrected, voice low. "And so do I." Before Beyoncé could ask what that meant, exhaustion swept over her like a wave. The moment she blinked, her vision blurred and the world shifted. She stood in a forest made of silver light. The trees glowed from within, branches whispering secrets in ancient tongues. A river cut through the woods, its surface reflecting stars that had no place in any real sky. Beyoncé clutched Nara to her chest. But when she looked up, Kael stood before them. Not as a man. Not entirely. His silhouette shimmered with wolf light, a ghostly aura outlining a great beast behind him, massive, regal, eyes burning the same violet as Nara's glow. "What is happening?" she whispered. Kael spoke without moving his lips. "This is the bond's memory." The forest pulsed, alive with something sacred. Images rose around them. Wolfline infants from centuries past, alphas bowing in protection, bloodlines intertwining, magic threading through generations like golden thread. One vision lingered. A child glowing like Nara, carried by a woman who looked eerily like Beyoncé, and protected by an alpha standing exactly where Kael did now. "You three are not the first," the forest whispered. "And you will not be the last." The dream cracked. Beyoncé jerked awake with a gasp. She was on the floor, Kael crouched beside her, hand braced at her back. "You collapsed," he said. "Did you see something?" She nodded, breath shaking. "A forest of silver. You were there. And Nara. And something was binding us, something ancient." Kael's expression darkened, but not with fear. Recognition. Acceptance. And something else, something he did not yet name. "The bond is real," he said softly. "And it is awakening faster than I expected." "What does it want?" Beyoncé whispered. Kael didn't answer immediately. "Then, to survive." Nara stirred as if agreeing. A sudden crash split the air. Metal clashed somewhere down the hallway, followed by shouts. Kael reacted instantly, scooping Nara into Beyoncé's arms. "Stay behind me." They stepped into the corridor just as a figure darted from the shadows, a hooded intruder, too fast, too silent. Kael shifted, power crackling off him. But before he could strike, a guard lunged from the side, tackling the intruder to the ground. More guards swarmed, dragging the struggling figure away. The corridor filled with torches, blades, and snarled orders. Kael's eyes burned with fury. "They're testing our defenses," he growled, trying to find weaknesses. Beyoncé's knees trembled, but she did not fall. She clutched Nara close, jaw tightening. "What would they have done if they reached her?" she asked, voice barely steady. Kael didn't soften the truth. "Taken her. Killed you." Beyoncé closed her eyes briefly. But when she opened them, something inside her had hardened. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me how to protect my child." Kael looked at her, truly looked, seeing not a poor village woman, but a mother forged by desperation and love. "You're stronger than you know," he murmured. "And she's depending on me." Kael stepped closer, voice dropping. "She depends on us." The word "us" again. And Beyoncé didn't flinch this time. He lifted a hand slowly, as if giving her every chance to refuse, and brushed a lock of her hair back behind her ear. It was nothing, a tiny gesture, but it carried the weight of a vow neither of them had spoken aloud. "Rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we prepare." She nodded. And as Kael escorted her back to the chamber, guards flanking them on all sides, Beyoncé realized something had changed. She was no longer a frightened mother dragged into a world she didn't understand. She was becoming part of it. Part of the bond. Part of the prophecy. Part of whatever destiny waited for her, Nara, and the Alpha whose shadow now walked beside theirs. The next morning dawned gray and cold, Blackmoor Keep wrapped in a mist that clung to the stone like breath held too long. Beyoncé stood in the training courtyard with Nara strapped against her chest, the baby bundled in soft furs that Kael himself had ordered for her. But the softness ended there. The moment Beyoncé stepped onto the frost-rimmed stones, the air changed. Guards paused mid-drill. Trainers glanced her way with unreadable expressions. And Kael, standing at the far edge of the yard, watched her with a gaze carved from iron. "This isn't a test of strength," he said as she approached. "It's a test of instinct." "Instinct?" she asked, rubbing Nara's back to keep her warm. "To protect her," Kael replied. "Not with claws. Not with weapons. With awareness. Wit. Resolve." Beyoncé straightened, shoulders firming. "I'm ready." Kael nodded once. "Then it begins now." The exercise started quietly enough. Kael's guards created a large perimeter around the courtyard. Beyoncé was instructed to walk its length while carrying Nara, reacting to any threat she sensed. At first, it felt like a strange chore, just walking in circles, listening to her heartbeat echo in her ears. But then she felt it. A shadow behind her. A shift in the air. A wrong footstep. She spun just in time to see a guard lunging, blunt training blade raised. Beyoncé dropped low, turning her body so Nara was shielded, and rolled across the frost-coated ground. Her breath left her in a gasp, but she didn't drop her daughter. Kael's voice rang across the courtyard. "Good." Another guard attacked from the left, fast, too fast. Beyoncé swayed, dodging by inches. She stumbled, but caught herself on one knee, keeping Nara tucked safely against her. A third guard appeared from behind the pillars. Then a fourth. Beyoncé's pulse thundered, but fear didn't swamp her this time. It sharpened her. Every instinct focused on Nara, how her baby's breaths quickened, how her tiny fingers curled tighter into Beyoncé's tunic, how a warm vibration pulsed from her daughter's skin. "Enough," Kael ordered after the last guard advanced. The men halted instantly. Beyoncé collapsed onto her hands, panting hard. But Nara was safe, still nestled against her unharmed. Kael approached slowly, each step measured, as if fighting the urge to run to her. "You lasted longer than most trained guards," he said, voice low with something that sounded suspiciously like awe. Her cheeks flushed. "I wasn't thinking. I just reacted." "That's what protection is," he murmured. Their eyes held for a moment too long, heat and surprise, and something deeper flickering between them, before Beyoncé tore her gaze away. She wasn't ready to understand what that meant. The trial wasn't over. Kael led her into a silent chamber within the keep. Its walls were lined with wolf-carved pillars, and a circular symbol glowed faintly in the stone floor. "Step inside," Kael instructed. "This test is different." Beyoncé hesitated. Will it hurt her? No, he nodded toward Nara. If anything, she may awaken. The word awakened a cold flutter in Beyoncé's stomach. But she stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air thickened. Heavy, humming with magic. The circle reacted to Nara first. A soft violet light radiated from her wrist, glowing brighter and brighter until Beyoncé's vision blurred. Mama, Nara whispered, not aloud, but inside Beyoncé's mind as clearly as if she had spoken. I'm here, Beyoncé whispered back. The chamber pulsed. Images flickered, flashes of wolfline blood, ancient forests, battles fought in moonlight. Beyoncé staggered. Her knees buckled. Kael lunged forward, grabbing her arms before she could fall. His touch steadied her instantly. Easy, he murmured. You're stepping into her magic. I'm not strong enough. But Kael shook his head, tightening his grip. You're stronger than you've been told your entire life. The magic surged again, sharper this time. A threat. A warning. A presence watching them from beyond the walls. Kael stiffened, sniffing the air. They're close. Who? Beyoncé asked. Rogue hunters. They've been circling the mountain for days. Before she could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A guard stumbled inside, bleeding from his shoulder. My lord, rogues at the northern gate. Kael didn't hesitate. Secure the keep. Double the perimeter. The guard ran. Kael turned to Beyoncé. Stay behind me. Do not leave this room. But Beyoncé shook her head, something fierce rising inside her. If they're after my child, I'm not hiding. For a heartbeat, Kael looked as if he wanted to argue. Then slowly he nodded. Then stay close. They reached the northern gate just as a dark cloaked figure leapt over the outer wall. The intruder moved with inhuman speed, eyes glowing feral red. A hunter, and not an ordinary one. He lunged straight toward Beyoncé. Time slowed. Beyoncé froze until Nara suddenly cried out, a soft but powerful wail that vibrated through the air like a shockwave. A burst of violet energy exploded from the baby's wrist. The hunter was thrown backward, slamming into a stone column hard enough to crack it. Silence fell. Even Kael stared, stunned. Nara hiccuped once, then giggled, as if she hadn't just unleashed ancient magic. Beyoncé held her trembling. Baby, what did you just do? Kael exhaled, voice low and reverent. Her first shield. A wolfline child's most sacred instinct. And she did it to protect me, Beyoncé whispered, off-flooding her. Kael stepped closer, eyes locked on Beyoncé with a heat that made her breath catch. She's not the only one, he said quietly. You protected her with everything you had today. And she responded to you. Their faces were inches apart. Not touching. Not crossing that line. But the space between them felt charged, magnetic, alive with something neither of them dared name. By evening, the hunters were driven off, the keep secured. Beyoncé sat by the fire in her chamber, Nara sleeping peacefully against her. Kael entered without his usual armor of command. His shoulders were relaxed, his voice low, softer, held warmth she hadn't heard before. You did. Is it? Siren met his eyes. You've seen what the child can do. She sees through master-level cloaking runes. Her scream triggered protective wards 3 floors away. Her Moonmark glows with prophetic warning. Tell me, Alpha, does that seem like the abilities of a normal child? Kaelor had no answer. He turned back to the genealogical chart, following the dragon moon line downward through the centuries until it ended abruptly in a generation marked with red ink. The symbol for extinction, for bloodlines ended by violence rather than time. But there, at the very bottom, written in fresher ink that couldn't be more than 5 years old, someone had added a single name in small, careful script, Vanaya. Who updated this? Kaelor's voice was sharp. Siren's face paled. I don't know. These archives are sealed. Only the royal archivist has access, and she died 2 years ago. No replacement has been appointed. So someone broke in. Someone who knew what they were looking for. Kaelor's mind raced. Someone who knew Vanaya existed and wanted to document her bloodline. Question is, was it to protect her or to mark her as a target? There's something else you should see. Siren moved to another table where employment records lay spread out. You asked me to research Lyra's history. She wasn't always a lower servant, Alpha. For years ago, she worked in the Queen's Wing. Kaelor's head snapped up. The Queen's Wing. Under the name Lyra Moonwhisper, though I suspect that's not her birth name. She served as a lady's maid to Queen Consort Mariella until... He consulted the records. Until 5 months before Vanaya's birth. She vanished overnight. No notice, no forwarding location. Just gone. The Queen's Wing. Where only the highest-born servants were permitted, where royal secrets were kept and royal scandals were buried. And Lyra had fled from there pregnant, hidden herself among the lower servants, changed her name, and spent 4 years keeping her daughter invisible. What scandal? Kaelor asked, though pieces were already falling into place. I took the liberty of checking the Queen's private journals. They're kept in the archives after a consort's death. Siren's voice was gentle, as if delivering bad news to a wounded animal. Queen Mariella died 3 years ago, as you know. But in her final entries, she wrote extensively about a betrayal. A lady's maid who had been seduced by a member of the royal family. The Queen believed the servant was carrying royal blood and feared the political implications if word got out. Royal blood, Kaelor repeated. The words tasted like ash. Which member of the royal family? Siren hesitated. She never named him directly. But Alpha, the timeline matches. Vanaya was born during the summer solstice 4 years ago. 9 months before that would place conception during the Autumn Alliance gathering. You were here. In the Citadel. Negotiating the Southern treaties. The memory came rushing back with painful clarity. Late nights in the war room, frustration with stubborn counselors, and a servant who had brought him tea and listened with genuine interest to his complaints. Lyra, though he hadn't known her name then, hadn't asked because alphas didn't form attachments to servants. She'd been beautiful and clever and kind, and for 3 nights she'd made him feel like a man instead of a political instrument. And then she'd vanished. Gods above, Kaelor breathed. She was running from me. He found Lyra in the servants' chapel, a small, quiet room where those who couldn't afford temple offerings came to pray. She knelt before the altar, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, tears streaming silently down her face. She didn't turn when he entered, but her shoulders tensed. How long have you known I was her father? Kaelor's voice echoed softly in the sacred space. Since the night she was conceived. Lyra's voice was barely audible. I felt it. The moment your seed took root. I felt the power of it, like lightning in my blood. And I knew. She finally turned to face him, her eyes red and swollen. I knew what it would mean. A servant carrying an alpha's child. Worse, a servant carrying your child. Your enemies would have killed me before she was born, just to prevent the threat she represented. So you ran. So I ran. Lyra stood on shaking legs. I changed my name, dyed my hair, scarred my hands with kitchen work so no one would recognize them as ladies' maid hands. I hid among the lower servants where no one looks too closely, where people mind their own business because they have their own secrets to keep. You should have told me. And what would you have done? Lyra's laugh was bitter. Claimed her? Made her legitimate? Put a target on her back that glows brighter than her moonmark. She was safer invisible, Alpha. Safer as no one. Until she saw the traitors. Kaelor moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. Until her gift revealed itself and invisibility was no longer an option. Yes. Lyra's composure cracked completely. Yes. And now they'll never stop coming for her. Because she's not just your daughter, Kaelor. She's not just Dragon Moon blood. She's both. She's the bridge between the old powers and the new. She's everything they fear. Tell me who she is, Kaelor commanded softly. Not who her mother is. Not who her father is. Tell me who she is. Lyra stared at him, tears falling freely now. She's the child who should have been killed in the womb. The bloodline that should have stayed extinct. She's the answer to a prophecy the Council tried to erase from history. That one day, a child born of 2 ancient lines would reunite the packs under a single banner and restore the power we've lost to politics and greed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She's either our salvation or our destruction. I don't know which. Behind them, too quiet for Lyra to hear but perfectly audible to Kaelor's enhanced senses, came a small, broken sound. Vanaya stood in the doorway, her Moonmark dim, her silver eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. "Am I bad blood?" she asked in a tiny voice that shattered Kaelor's heart. "Is that why people want to hurt me? Because I shouldn't exist?" Kaelor crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and sank to his knees, bringing himself to her eye level. He cupped her small face in his large hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen to me very carefully, Vanaya. You are not bad blood. You are not a mistake. You are not something that should have been prevented." His voice was fierce, absolute. "You are my daughter. You carry strength that kings would kill for, wisdom that takes others lifetimes to learn, and power that flows from the very roots of our kind. Your blood is not cursed, it is stronger than any throne. But they want to kill me. Yes, because they fear what you represent. They fear change. They fear losing their power. They fear a future where their conspiracies and manipulations won't work anymore." Kaelor's thumbs brushed away her tears. "But I promise you this. They will not touch you. Not while I breathe. Not while I rule. And when you are grown, when you come into your full power, you will show them exactly why the Dragon Moon line was never meant to end." Vanaya threw her arms around his neck, and Kaelor held her tightly, this tiny fierce miracle who had somehow survived 4 years of danger he hadn't even known existed. Over her shoulder, he met Lyra's eyes. The servant, no, the lady's maid who had borne his child in secret, looked utterly exhausted, as if she'd been carrying a mountain for years and had finally been allowed to set it down. "You're under my protection now," he told her. "Both of you. Official, documented, unbreakable. That will make you vulnerable," Lyra warned. "Your enemies will use us against you. Let them try." Gold flickered in Kaelor's eyes. "I'm done playing defensive games." In a locked chamber deep within the Citadel's administrative wing, 5 figures convened by magical projection. Their true bodies safely distant, their images shimmering with teleportation runes. "The Alpha has claimed the child," one voice said, distorted by magic. "She's no longer a loose witness. She's an heir." "Then we accelerate," another responded. "The public signing. Tomorrow night. Every noble family in attendance. The contract must be sealed before he has time to investigate further. And if he refuses? We've prepared for that contingency." A third figure leaned forward, their face hidden in shadow. "We have his blood. We have the words of binding. If he won't sign willingly, we'll force his hand in front of the entire court. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the mate bond will be complete and irreversible." "What about the child?" "One problem at a time. First we bind the Alpha. Then we deal with his inconvenient offspring. And the mother?" A pause, heavy with malice. "Accidents happen in the Citadel. Servants fall downstairs. Fires start in the night. Grief makes people careless." The speaker's smile was audible even through the magical distortion. "Let's see how protective he is when he's mourning a mate he can't remember choosing." The projections flickered and died, leaving only darkness and the echo of conspiracy. Tomorrow night, everything would change. One way or another, the Alpha would be bound. The Grand Hall had not seen this many Alphas under one roof since the Treaty of 7 Clans, 40 years prior. Banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, each one representing a territory, a bloodline, a pact that had agreed to honor Kaelor's political alliance through the mate contract with Lady Seraphine of the Western Reach. Silver and gold thread caught the light from 1,000 candles, turning the hall into a constellation of power and prestige. At the center of it all stood the ceremonial dais, where Kaelor would publicly sign the contract that would bind him to a woman he'd met twice and barely remembered. Except he wouldn't. Because the contract was a lie, and tonight, he would prove it. Kaelor stood in his private antechamber, adjusting the formal Alpha regalia he rarely wore, black leather and silver clasps, ancestral armor that had been passed down through 12 generations. In the mirror, he looked every inch the warrior king his people expected. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Vanaya slipped through the door, and Kaelor's breath caught. Someone, probably Lyra, had dressed her in a simple but elegant gown of deep blue, and her hair had been braided with silver ribbons that matched her eyes. The Moonmark on her forehead had been left uncovered, glowing softly in the candlelight. "Are you scared?" she asked, her small voice carrying a weight of understanding no 4-year-old should possess. Terrified, Kaelor admitted, kneeling before her. "But not of the traitors. I'm scared that I'll fail you, that I won't protect you well enough." Vanaya tilted her head, considering this with her characteristic solemnity. "Mama says being scared means you care about something. That brave people are just scared people who do the thing anyway. Your mother is very wise." "Will there be lots of people?" "Hundreds. All 7 clan alphas and their retinues. Nobles from every territory. The entire royal council." Kaelor took her small hands in his. "And I'm going to ask you to stand before all of them and tell them what you saw. Can you do that?" Vanaya's Moonmark pulsed once, brightly. "Yes, because if I don't, the bad men win. And you taught me that bad men shouldn't win." Kaelor pulled her into a fierce hug, wondering how he'd gone 28 years without knowing this child existed and how he'd ever lived without her steady presence in his life. "Come then, little moon. Let's go shake the foundations of this kingdom." The grand hall fell silent as Kaelor entered. 7 alphas rose from their seats, a show of respect for the host and the most powerful alpha among them. Alpha Thorn of the Western Reach, Lady Seraphine's father, smiled warmly. Alpha Kestra of the Northern Mountains inclined her head with characteristic stoicism. The others followed suit, and for a moment, it looked like every other state ceremony Kaelor had endured. Then Vanaya stepped out from behind him, her small hand clasped in his, and the silence changed quality, became shocked, confused, questioning. A child. He'd brought a child to the mate contract ceiling. Whispers rippled through the assembly like wind through grass. "Who is that? Why would he?" "Look at her forehead, is that?" Counselor Dren stepped forward, his face carefully neutral but his eyes sharp with calculation. He was old guard, one of 5 counselors Kaelor had inherited from his father's reign, and until 3 days ago, Kaelor had trusted him completely. "Alpha Kaelor," Dren said, his voice carrying the formal cadence of ceremony. "We are gathered to witness the sealing of the alliance contract between yourself and Lady Seraphine of the Western Reach. Shall we proceed?" In a moment. Kaelor's voice was calm, but it carried alpha command, the tone that turned suggestion into inevitability. "First, I have a matter of grave importance to bring before this assembly." Dren's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "Surely any concerns can be addressed after." "They will be addressed now." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The 7 alphas exchanged glances, their instincts reading the tension like predators scenting blood. Kaelor gestured, and Master Siren stepped forward carrying 2 scrolls sealed in protective glass cases, one scroll pristine and ornate, the other showing signs of wear. 3 nights ago, Kaelor began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "My royal mages examined the mate contract I was meant to sign tonight. What they discovered was a conspiracy so profound, so carefully orchestrated, that it has taken decades to bring to fruition. This is highly irregular." Another counselor began. Silence. The word cracked like a whip, and the counselor's mouth snapped shut involuntarily. Kaelor continued, "The contract I was given is a forgery. A masterwork of illegal magic designed not to create a political alliance, but to force a false mate bond, destroy any claim my true mate might have, and ultimately end the Alpha bloodline within 3 generations." The hall exploded into chaos. Alphas rose from their seats. Nobles shouted questions. Lady Seraphine's face had gone white as parchment. Counselor Dren's expression remained calm, but Kaelor saw his hand drift toward his robes, toward whatever contingency plan he'd prepared for this exact moment. "These are serious accusations," Alpha Thorn said, his voice cutting through the noise. "What proof do you offer?" "The testimony of my royal mages, who can present their findings." The evidence of the scrolls themselves, which contain compulsion runes and blood seals outlawed by the Council of Alphas 2 centuries ago. Kaelor paused, letting that sink in. And the testimony of a witness who saw the scrolls being switched. A witness. Dren's laugh was just slightly too sharp. Alpha Kaelor, with respect, if such a witness existed, why wait until now to bring them forward? This seems like a convenient excuse to avoid a political alliance you've grown cold on. Because the witness is 4 years old, Kaelor said quietly, and someone has been trying to murder her for the past week. Every eye in the hall turned to Vanaya. She stood perfectly still, her small hand still clasped in Kaelor's, her Moonmark glowing steadily. She looked impossibly small in the vast hall, impossibly vulnerable surrounded by centuries of power and politics. "Come here, little one," Alpha Kaelor said gently from her seat.